Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to look at Fujitsu's latest UltraBook. This is the business line UltraBook, and it's the Fujitsu LifeBook U772. They also have a U572, which is a consumer version, pretty similar. A couple of differences we'll tell you about, but this one is a 14-inch UltraBook, third generation Core i5 and i7 Ivy Bridge CPUs, Intel HD 4000 graphics, and a 14-inch display, but pretty much in the size of a 13.3-inch. It's thin. It's very attractive. It's unique looking. Nobody's going to accuse us of looking like a Mac, kind of the two-tone look. I'm going to look at it now. So this is a Fujitsu LifeBook U772, 14-inch UltraBook. Like I said, very compact though. As you can see, it's quite thin. It's 0.61 inches, which is really one of the thinnest UltraBooks. If you count the feet on the bottom, it's 0.69 inches. It's got a nice two-tone finish, one of the more stylish UltraBooks, really. I really like the two-tone thing going on with the black here, and it sets off the LED indicators in the front here, makes them easier to see. When we take a look, you can see just how thin it is, a little curve here, so it makes it look a little bit thinner than it really is, but still, it's a very skinny notebook. If we take a look at the side, you can see plenty of ports on here. Again, this is a business-oriented notebook, so ports are fairly plentiful. We've got our SD card slot here, two USB 3.0 ports, one of them is a sleep and charge port, full-size HDMI, and here's a little proprietary connector, and this is for the Ethernet adapter that comes with the business model. And we've seen UltraBooks that come with USB Ethernet adapters, they're typically 10-100. This proprietary connector lets them get more speed out of it, so it's actually up to gigabit Ethernet, and this is what the funny little thing looks like. But the nice thing is it doesn't use up your USB port and it is faster, so there's your Ethernet jack right there, so that's going to face toward the rear, and it just plugs in like so. It's better than nothing, certainly. But not up to Toshiba, who always manages to find a way to get those Ethernet jacks built into the side of their skinny notebooks. Back area, you can see the hinge design. On this side, we've got some vents. Here's your power port, Kensington lock slot, a USB 2.0 port, which, well, I don't know why it isn't 3.0, but it can be handy for legacy devices. There are some USB 2.0 peripherals that actually don't behave well with USB 3.0 ports, so what the heck. And here's your 3.5mm audio jack. If we take a look at the bottom, you can see there's our fan intake right there. There's a docking port. They do make an optional docking port, score some points against the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon, which lost the docking port. We have an actual 3G SIM card slot here, and this just pulls up and you can stick the card inside the hole. Pretty much the same place again as the ThinkPad Carbon. Little black feet, and you see all these little rubber plugs here on the bottom. You have to pull those off to access the Phillips head screws if you want to get to the internals. Like most UltraBooks, pretty much this is designed to not be opened up. I would like to see it be a little bit easier for a business notebook, though, where your IT department might really want to get in there, especially because it has a standard SO-DIMM slot for RAM inside. Ships with 4 gigs, but you could theoretically upgrade that to 8. But once you pop these little rubber guys off, it's pretty hard to get them back on again and get them to stay there. In fact, you can see we actually lost one of our rubber feet where I popped one off. I could not get it to stick in there, and there's a little Phillips head screw. This is your stereo speaker here, another one here. Really small slots, really small audio volume. So we take a look inside. Here's the keyboard deck, and you can see pretty roomy keyboard here. We have our arrow pad over here, page up and page down keys in a logical place. The delete has been swapped with the pause. Why manufacturers like to mess with that delete key location, I don't know. I just wish they would stop. Since it's a business-oriented notebook, there's your fingerprint scanner. Lots of LED wireless indicators here, labeled pretty nicely. That's your power button with the cool LED blue ring around it. Echo mode, you just press the button there. Some more indicators. And as you take a look up close, it'd probably be easier to see in photographs that we'll have in our written review. There's a kind of etched pattern along the top edge. It gives us some visual interest. You can also see the keyboard is slightly recessed. Now this is a skinny notebook, so they don't have room to recess it a whole lot. And this keyboard layout is overall fine. Key size is good. Absolutely no travel. One of the worst keyboards I've used in that respect, I have to say. And you know, we've reviewed many of the UltraBooks on the market. They're all thin, so they all tend to have shallow keyboards with not much feedback. But this is, to me, borderline unusable. I hate to say it, but not really a great keyboard for typists. We've got the Synaptics trackpad here. It's pretty good size. strange software driver. It has momentum enabled. That means once you do that, the cursor keeps going woo across the screen. Now you can disable that feature, and I haven't really seen that since a couple of years ago on some HP Envy models. They experimented with that, and I thought that had been put to sleep as a kind of bizarre idea. But there's nothing wrong with yours if you buy one. That's just the software setting, and you can disable momentum if you don't want your cursor to continue flying gently across the screen like a slow-mo ping pong ball. Surprisingly, for a business notebook, they have plastered it with a lot of stickers here. You can, of course, remove those if you want. It might take a little Vaseline or alcohol to get all the goo off, but really well stickered up here. This keyboard, by the way, not backlit. Bad thing for a business-oriented notebook. Too bad. Now, as we look at the notebook open, you can see it has a very skinny bezel here around the edge, which makes it look really nice and modern. Of course, the display actually doesn't fill up all the glass, so you still have the black border here near the metal display. But no complaints there. This is a 14-inch display, 1366 by 768 resolution. That's kind of a pretty common resolution for ultrabooks and notebooks, so we won't beat up Fujitsu too much for that, but given that it's a business notebook with productivity in mind, we really would like to see a high-res option there. At 14 inches, it just seems like a kind of a waste of space to have that lower resolution. This is a very glossy LED backlit TN panel. There is a matte option. You really might want to consider if glare bothers you if you work in bright workplaces, because this is one of the most reflective panels I've ever seen. Brightness is pretty good on the panel. Viewing angles are typical for TN, which is to say moving this display forward or back will really radically change the contrast and the color saturation, and you have to find the sweet spot. So points off for that. I really would like to see Ultrabook manufacturers for these $1,000 and plus items start using better quality panels. Honestly, you look at it all the time. It really is an important thing. We have a webcam up here. It's 1280 by 800 resolution. Built-in microphone on the notebook. And since this is a business notebook, it's available with a variety of Intel vPro ULV processors, ultra-low voltage. That's what's used in Ultrabooks. They consume less power, they generate less heat. They're not quite as fast as full mobile processors used on bigger notebooks, but for general productivity work, occasionally working in Photoshop, some development work, stuff like that, they're certainly adequate. The base model has a Core i5-3317U, which is what you see on most every Ultrabook. It's 1.7 gigahertz. It's perfectly capable. And there are two higher-end options, both with vPro, a Core i5, and our unit here has a Core i7 running at 2 gigahertz with Turbo Boost going much higher than that. As I mentioned, it has 4 gigs of RAM, and it's supposed to be upgradable given how difficult it was to take those little rubber feet off. We didn't rip it open to double check, but we trust Fujitsu on that. Likewise, the consumer version also has a DIMM slot. With that one, you got 2 gigs soldered on the motherboard and 2 gig DIMM. This business model has no RAM soldered on the motherboard and just a single DIMM slot that comes with the 4 gig DIMM standard. You can get this with conventional spinning hard drives and SSD caching drives, or just straight solid state drives. Ours is 128 gig Micron SSD drive. Very fast in test. Pretty impressed with the speed of that. It has dual band Wi-Fi, Intel Wi-Fi Advanced N6205, and optional Bluetooth 4.0. If you get the consumer version of this, the U772, you'll have a different Intel adapter that comes with WiDi software. This one has Intel management software for the Wi-Fi, and WiDi is not pre-installed. I haven't tried installing it to see if it would work. It probably would, though. Since it's a business notebook, you get all the security-oriented features like the vPro processor for remote management. You get the fingerprint scanner here, BIOS-enabled security features, all the usual stuff you'd expect from a business notebook. The BIOS is enabled for CompuTrace as well. It has a 4-cell, 45 watt per hour battery, and so far in our test it's been good for about 6.5 hours at 50% brightness, which puts it middle of the pack for Ultrabooks. That's just fine. And it comes with a very compact adapter with plenty of cord on it. It's good, you won't have to be too glued to the wall, but that's a fairly small adapter there. And light, too. Like most Ultrabooks, it has Intel HD 4000 integrated graphics. More than capable enough, again, for productivity use, not a gaming machine, clearly. The LifeBook U772 starts at $1149 for the Core i5-3317 with a 320 gig spinning hard drive. And you can go up from there. This is the Core i7 with a 128 gig SSD. You can go up to 256 gigs SSD, and this one costs around $1649. So, like most business notebooks, it's expensive. This is not going to compete with consumer Ultrabooks that are flying under the $1,000 radar. And the consumer version of this, the U572, lists for $9.99. We're already seeing it for $8.99, even $7.99 at some retailers. Now, as a business notebook, its biggest competitor would be the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon, which we have right here, so you can see them side by side. About the same size. We're talking 14-inch machines. Both weigh just around 3 pounds. The ThinkPad's 3 pounds. The Fujitsu's 3.15, so pretty close. But the ThinkPad, well, it gives you a lot more bang for the buck. They're about the same price, but you get a 1600 by 900 matte display with good viewing angles on the ThinkPad, a really excellent, well, typical ThinkPad keyboard, and a very good trackpad. So, showing up the Fujitsu, there it is. ThinkPad has its usual ThinkPad look. Nice matte black, raven black, soft touch finish. Both good looking machines. ThinkPad's made of carbon, but it feels, you know, typical ThinkPad. You could beat somebody with it. The Fujitsu feels a little bit more delicate, but it seems like it's a very well made machine and robust. It just doesn't have that kind of feel to it. As you can see, the Fujitsu opens pretty wide, not quite as wide as the ThinkPad that opens completely flat, but I don't know if anybody really has a use for a completely flat open notebook. The fact that it tilts this far back is useful because of the limited viewing angle. So if you want to hold it at a kind of unusual orientation and you're losing out on screen contrast and colors, you have enough leeway here. You can see the hinge is kind of springy on the loose side. Sometimes I had trouble keeping it open firmly at some positions. The LifeBook U772 scores well on synthetic benchmarks. On PCMark Vantage, it scored 11,700. Again, that's with the Core i7 2 GHz and with a pretty fast 128 gig SSD and 4 gigs of DDR3 1600 MHz RAM. It's generally quite quiet. Of course, it's sitting here idle right now, but it's not making much noise. In general, unless you're really taxing it, playing a 1080p Adobe Flash video, which doesn't really make a lot of sense unless you have an external monitor plugged in because it exceeds the resolution of this panel, you'll start to hear the fan kick up. And if we're doing something like running benchmarks or trying to play games on it, which again, this really isn't a gaming machine, the fan will kick on and you'll hear it. It's pretty loud, and unfortunately, it's a little bit on the whiny side, a little high-pitched. It doesn't sound like there's anything wrong with it. It's just, yeah, one of those kind of fans. So that's a Fujitsu LifeBook U772 UltraBook, available now starting at $11.49, and there's a consumer version, the U572, that's a 13.3-inch, otherwise pretty much the same. Keyboard layout changes a little, the page up, page down buttons move to the side. Otherwise you're looking at pretty much the same thing, but lesser price and fewer security features. No vPro Intel processor options and no TPM for the fingerprint scanner. And that one's $9.99 list, so you'll find it discounted. It's a great looking machine, it's a fast performing machine, and it mostly runs fairly cool and quiet. The incredibly shallow keyboard with no backlighting is a real negative. The trackpad we won't complain about because you can turn off that momentum scrolling and not have the cursor go a little wild on you there. And the display, well, sadly it's distinctly average. A lot of glare, and again, TN panel that requires angling. We're also not too thrilled with the hinge that's not so stiff. Things we like about it, it's very light, it's very stylish looking. It doesn't look like every other UltraBook on the planet. It has a lot of security features, the components are high quality, and the RAM is upgradable. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Visit our website for the full review of the Fujitsu LifeBook U772, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.